Supercharged, a podcast focusing on renewable energy and the passion behind the movement. Supercharged is a thoughtful journey through renewable energy sustainability and an integrated lifestyle. Subscribe and listen each week as we chat with thought leaders, influencers, and those who simply choose to live a better way. And hopefully, along the way, you too will be inspired to live supercharged. This is Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Supercharged, the podcast that focuses on sustainability, renewable energy, and the passion behind the movement. And I have a very special guest today, Maggie Grout. Maggie, thank you for joining us on Supercharged.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is an amazing story, and listeners, I encourage you to either listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. But this is the story behind this is so good. But before we get started, Maggie, just share a little bit about yourself.
Of course. So I'm the founder of Thinking Huts. We're a nonprofit planning to build our first 3D printed school in Madagascar, hopefully at the end of the year, if travel allows us. I just graduated from university, but I started with this idea about 6 years ago. So it's been a long journey to getting to this point, but it'll be amazing to see it come to life.
So you talked a little bit about what you do, but tell us a little bit more about who you are and where you went to school and just the whole backstory.
Sure. So I went to school at CU Boulder. I'm a business major, but I knew I wanted to do something different. I wasn't into the whole profit maximization. I was more into how can we use business to make a bigger social impact. So that's really what shaped me to pursue a nonprofit, even though it's definitely a more challenging career path to go after.
For sure. Well, I'm curious. So we talked a little bit before off camera before I hit the big red record button, but tell me from your perspective, just to really get kind of granular here, how do you define, when you hear the word sustainability, what does that mean to you? And, how would you define it and maybe just kind of the why behind that?
I would define it as finding a synergy between people and the planet, because I think often people just focus on one part of it. But in order to make progress, you need everybody involved to find tangible solutions that you can address a lot of the problems that we do face in the world.
Well, say you mentioned just a minute ago, you said, I've been working on this for like 7 years. So what was that light bulb that came on that you said, hey, I've got to kind of dive down into this and really kind of throw all my efforts into this, but like, what's the why behind it?
I largely associate my why to just being adopted. I think that has shaped my whole life. So probably from the very beginning, I knew I wanted to make a difference and not just live my life for myself. I think a lot of times, especially now in today's social media culture, people just think about what things can do for them. But there are so many people that are not as privileged or have the same opportunities. So I think that's what I wanted to pursue in my life.
Well, I mean, you're getting good. You're answering questions before I even ask them now, because you preempt my questions. But it really is a good segue into kind of the next question I had for you. Is that it's really like, so how has that caused you to live differently? How has that, you said this is my why, being adopted and you wanting to give back and pour into people and stuff like that. So I mean, I really want to applaud that, because that is so unique in our world today. But tell me, what does that lead you to do?
I would say probably prioritizing things in a different way. I think I probably had to sacrifice a lot growing up, in the sense that I had to work on this before, maybe like hanging out with friends and stuff like that. So just a bigger perspective on life and what's important, because I think that we do have limited time here. So you better, I guess, spend your time working on something that'll last and impact people well beyond when you've gone from the earth. So
and make a real difference. I'm curious, how did you arrive at the whole idea of 3D printing schools versus just say, we'll just raise money. We'll make it with local materials. We'll make it with cinder blocks, whatever the, the common, construction, resource or materials used in whatever area you're looking at. So what was kind of the light bulb moment that said, I really need to we need to do this with a 3D printer?
I think that at the heart of it, I just was asking myself, why is innovation not within the nonprofit world? I think a lot of times you'll see it in for-profit industries, but where it's really needed, you just don't find it at all. So I thought if we can apply it and I guess move the nonprofit world, because it's very slow moving, I would say, and stuck in the traditional way of doing things, and we can bring that sense of innovation to it, we can impact more people and really scale that up.
Was there, from a cost standpoint, like if you were building with, traditional materials in Madagascar versus a 3D printed school, what's the cost difference in those two things?
So we estimate we can cut costs almost in half. And then as we continue to replicate it with the economies of scale, the cost will continue to go down. I think just in the beginning, whenever something's new, there will be more costs associated with it being fairly new in that sense. But in the long run, as the technology becomes more affordable and more people use it, even beyond just school construction, I think we'll start seeing that become more widely accessible, even beyond Madagascar.
So is this a situation where you have to, I guess, take a 3D printer to the location, or are you printing these materials somewhere else and assembling the school at Madagascar? What's the process? Kind of walk us through the whole process.
Yeah, so we will be shipping the printer to Madagascar. Our partner is based in Malawi, so it'll be a short plane ride away.
Just across the ocean there, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's the main external thing that would be coming in. And then we plan to locally source everything else. The main other thing would probably be the proprietary concrete mixture for the walls. But we do plan to source that in the future in country. But it takes a while to get the mixture correct. Like it needs to be mixing for at least a year. So for the pilot, we probably won't be able to, and we'll have to ship it in as well.
So are you looking at doing this solely in Madagascar, or are you looking at doing this in many locations across the planet?
I would love to do this replication in multiple countries. We've already been reached out to by a lot of organizations, even in India and then throughout the African continent. So I think there's a huge need to be filled. But I think a lot of it just comes down to the funding. So we'll probably stay in Madagascar the first 3 to 5 years, and hopefully more people will embrace the concept.
Now, is this something that, like USAID or the United Nations or, any number of NGOs out there that might see this as a viable option because there's a lot of, I guess, organizations that are building schools, they're, providing education resources, that type of thing. Are you partnering with any of these entities, or have you reached out to any of them and saying, hey, and we would love for you to, fund this through a grant, building these schools?
That would be incredible. We have considered that. It's just very hard to find who to meet with since they're such a large organization.
So it's amazing what you've accomplished. So has a school actually been built on site at this stage?
Not yet. We have not been able to travel there. We're just finishing up our funding right now. Things have definitely been slowed down by the pandemic, but we're trying to fill a funding gap of about $180K to transport the printer from Malawi to Madagascar. And then if all things go well, we'll be building our first one in November, and then it'll be open by the school year in the spring.
And you're talking about November this year?
Yes, that's what we're hoping for, but the travel borders are still closed. So we just got to stay optimistic.
So is there it's kind of like the age-old question of nonprofits. Is there a for-profit opportunity here? Say, if you can cut construction costs, exponentially, I would say there's a tremendous for-profit opportunity for, building factories or building offices or building houses, to sell, to maybe fund the schools? Is that a model that you've looked at?
That's definitely something we've considered. I think we could definitely spin it off into housing as well. And then also maybe creating our own printer that is more efficient in more remote areas, because that hasn't really been done before. But I think what we've realized is it's much of a chicken and egg situation.
Yeah.
So we've just got to get through this first school, and then
Exactly. Yeah,
it'll
let's
be
get
easier.
something on the ground. We'll have something tangible to show people. So is there when you look at people in this space, and I know that you spent 7 years working on this, so I'm sure you've done a tremendous amount of research. Who out there do you think is doing things well? Not just necessarily in the 3D space or 3D printing space, but just kind of sustainability as a whole. Who have you tried to model kind of your heartbeat after?
I would probably say Patagonia is the company I look up to the most.
Yeah.
Just how their culture goes beyond even their employee, and type of the internal structure of it. Like, people are very passionate about supporting it. And I think that's what makes a successful company, if you can go beyond just the employee support.
So what's missing in the movement? I mean, you've kind of looked at this, tried to look at this holistically, kind of 360 degrees, and you see people like Patagonia that are leading well, and they're leading out, especially they're the tip of the spear, so to speak. But what do you think is missing? What have you discovered, I guess, in the time that you spent here, that you're thinking, okay, this is really kind of a nut that we have not cracked yet, that we just don't have a good grasp of. So what are some of the things that are missing?
I think probably it's the mindset. I think a lot of businesses view things as a zero-sum game. So if you try to help people, then that takes away from profits. But I really do think that we're starting to see a slow shift where you can do both and find a balance in between. So I'm hopeful that in the coming years, we'll see more businesses sort of embrace that as well.
So, I mean, it's almost like that, what I've seen is that some businesses are almost being forced to kind of change this mindset, because, you're looking at millennials and Gen Z that are like, we don't want to do business with businesses that don't get this, that haven't bought into this, or haven't, committed to this. And do you see that as well?
I definitely think that the consumer behavior has influenced businesses too, because I think they're being more vocal about these causes. And they may not be particularly supportive in the sense that it's more greenwashing, I feel. So on the marketing might seem like they're supporting, but it's just not super helpful in actuality.
So you used a term just then called greenwashing. Unpack that just a little bit. What does that mean?
Yes, so that means a company will use a social cause to benefit themselves, but not actually have, I guess, a real impact on the cause or move that forward.
And that they're only doing it for the sake of appearance, or is that kind of the motivation?
Yes, mainly just PR, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a double-edged sword. It's almost like, you feel as a business owner, you might feel the pressure, of social demand, that's saying you need to make a change, and they're going, yeah, but I've also got shareholders and investors that are saying, no, the bottom line is the only thing that I'm looking at right now. So it's like this triple bottom line, kind of crazy, chaotic schizophrenia that, business owners are maybe feeling right now. You just got out of Boulder. I'm assuming you were in a some sort of business entrepreneurship, some kind of track there. Was that this triple bottom line idea, was that discussed in your classes?
I would say not really in the whole curriculum, but I was part of a certificate program that focused on social responsibility and ethics. So those classes definitely incorporated it, but I wouldn't say like the general curriculum really emphasized it.
So are there any other people doing this? Are there any other organizations, either for-profit or not-for-profit, that are out there trying to 3D print schools, or are you kind of leading the way?
I would say we'll be the first for schools in terms of that capacity, but I know that the most similar is New Story, who are building 3D printed houses. And I think what they're doing is really incredible. So hopefully we can make progress in both infrastructure.
Now, is this this printer that's in Malawi, is this a printer that is like, specifically designed to print buildings, or is this just a large 3D printer that could virtually print anything?
It's specifically designed for buildings. I believe it's a cobod printer. So I think they're making quite a splash throughout Europe as well as here in the US.
And why, Malawi seems like a unique place to land a 3D printer. What is is it in Malawi for the purpose of going to Madagascar for your build, or was it there just building houses or something already?
It's already there building houses. So thankfully it's quite nearby, because that was a big concern at the beginning when I was planning out these operations. Like that's why I decided maybe not for a US based company, because that would just be such a long journey.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. I mean, it's expensive enough just to kind of a little short, jaunt across a small inlet there. But yeah, I can't imagine what it would take to move it from, you know, 8,000 miles away, or however far that might be. But let's go back just a little bit to kind of drill down a little more in the kind of the sustainability space. And I mean, it's obviously important to you. I mean, you're committing your entire life to, kind of in this whole, ecosystem. But what would you say are one or two things that you personally have done, and just in your personal life that, what changes have you made, to kind of push this forward?
I think in terms of sustainability, I would say just being more minimalist in the sense of seeing what you actually need. Because I think that's another thing that ties into the world we live in. It's very materialistic. And that's what you see in a lot of the marketing too, that you always need more when maybe you just can exist on less.
And if you were talking to, some of your peers and they were just trying to think, okay, what are some pretty easy next steps? What are some pretty, uh, low impact or high impact, low cost, ways to kind of wake up tomorrow and things you could do? How would you coach them?
I would say it comes down to habits. So maybe starting small would be the best way. Maybe something like switching out to a reusable water bottle, because it's not going to happen overnight, I feel.
That is exactly true. And do you see, I mean, in your age group, in your peers, I mean, when you share your story, I can't imagine that there's much pushback. I mean, it seems like to me that this is like, what do you do? I save puppies, from the road type thing. I mean, it just seems like such a great idea. What have you gotten any pushback from anybody at all?
I think the main obstacles I faced do come down to age, though, because even though my peers think it's a great idea and they're very supportive, the people who do have the funding, I think at times like my age can pose a challenge, because they think I maybe am not as experienced, even though I've been working on it quite a while. So on the inside, it's more difficult, I would say, like raising funds and people are led to believe.
Wow. And so what is your major funding strategy? I mean, are these, $5, $10 at a time type things? Let's just Venmo and, that type of strategy? Or is this like, no, we're going after, more like institutional, resources, and this is this is how we're going to move the needle more quickly?
Honestly, we are winging it a bit. So it's a multi-pronged approach. So we do have the smaller donors that believe in us from the beginning. And then we're also trying to find more high net worth individuals. I think that's probably the best way to go. Institutional partners, I found like with corporates and then also grants too, it just takes so long.
Yeah.
And they like to see like maybe 4 or 5 done before.
Right. Yeah, it's like the difference between saying an angel investor and the next capital round, the seed round that says, you know what, we will invest with you when you can show that you're actually getting some traction. The whole idea of venture capital says, we want to come in when you're already earning, when you're your annual revenue is 5 million or so, and that is another chicken or egg, argument that you're going to run into. I personally think your age would be an advantage. I mean, the fact that just the story behind what you've accomplished at such a young age is just amazing to me.
Well, thank you. That means a lot. Yeah, I think a lot of times I just don't realize that people know about what I'm doing. So it's always cool to hear.
So are you getting good media exposure? Are you getting some TV opportunities? Are you getting some opportunities on other podcasts or YouTube interviews or anything like that?
I think most of it has mainly stuck to articles. I try to focus it more on just the project, but I've sort of realized to push it forward, like I need to sort of step into the spotlight. So that's something I've sort of grappled with too, because I am not like somebody who usually shares a lot about myself. But I think for the organization, it's something I've just had to do.
It's what's the old adage that says you just take one for the team. You have to, because it is that, I mean, story sells, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way or negative way. I mean, it really is. That's kind of the key of marketing, especially in today's world. It's just, what is the story behind this that is going to compel someone to do something different? And that's what you're kind of asking to do. And are there any like websites or resources or whatever that you could recommend somebody just kind of step into that you would, other than thinkinghuts.org? Is there any other resources that you think are really good in this space, or just in sustainability as a whole?
I would recommend Springwise. They always capture the latest innovations, and they also are aware of the sustainability component too. So I would definitely check that out. I think they're based in London, but it's a very global publication.
Yeah, I actually subscribe to that, and you are exactly right. It is amazing. I mean, just the resources. Have you been featured on Springwise?
Yes, we were. So it's very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got a pretty broad, certainly pretty broad reach. But is there any tech that you really think is a kind of a great add-on in this space?
I would say I'm very interested in what I think that it's called Starlink, and I think that's part of the whole SpaceX thing.
Yeah.
But I think getting people connected to the grid is a huge thing. I think even though we're so advanced here, we're leaving a lot of people behind. And I think that's what we're beginning to find as well, like the need for infrastructure. Like while we're adapting to the digital world, people in the African continent, and what we found in Madagascar is that they don't even have access to the internet to make that switch.
Yeah. And is that part of the plan for the school, that the school would be kind of a smart school? Is it going to have, like internet provided? Is it going to have kind of green, like solar? What's the thought behind kind of the energy around the construction?
Yes, that is my greater vision, for it to be sustainable, solar panels, and then also using it as a hub to connect people to the internet. Because if we're able to place them throughout like Madagascar and other places in the world where they are in rural locations, it would be a great hotspot to provide that.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe 24/7. I mean, just a gathering location. What size are we talking here? I mean, is this like a one classroom building? Is this, I mean, is it all the grades, or is it just like we're just aiming at early education, we're aiming at high school? What's kind of the target, and how big are the schools?
Yes, so our initial design is 765 square feet, but the idea I had pitched to our architects, Amir is the lead on that, was for it to be a modular design. So it's very human-centered in the sense that the community can tell us what they want modified. So we can expand the school if they want it for multiple ages, and it can be more like a honeycomb looking structure.
Yeah.
But our first school will be on a university campus, so it'll be just the one hut to pilot it, prove it out, and then it'll be easier to raise funds for the next however many years to hopefully build a lot more schools. And yeah, that's the plan for that. For the first one, that age group is 16 to 18, but our target moving forward is more primary age, where the infrastructure is needed more.
That's an amazing vision, and yeah, anything we can do to assist in that vision, I would love to do, and I know Supercharged would love to do. But Maggie, as we close today, is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you just kind of want to close us with? Any vision that you have that you want to share with our listeners?
I would probably just say to the people that are listening that it's not too late to start like pursuing your vision. I think a lot of people just will not pursue it because they think it's not possible. But if you stick with it, it will eventually come to fruition.
What a way to close this out today. It's never too late to start. That message is so broad, so ubiquitous, and so applicable to so many things. And Maggie, thank you again for just taking time today and just sharing your heart and your vision behind, thinkinghuts.org, and just the whole idea behind why you've chosen to live differently. And we just want to encourage others to do the same. Maggie, thank you again for taking time.
Thank you so much for having me.